World War II is sweeping the globe, and the Allied powers are punishing Germany's arrogance. British and American bombings of Germany's cities and military headquarters are not only crippling Germany's military and production, but shattering the German spirit. This is the situation Adolf Hitler, leader of the Third Reich of Germany, has found himself in, as his grip on Europe slowly but surely loosens. Hitler knows he must do something to change the tide of the war, to scare the Allied powers into submission, and to restore the German spirit into his nation.
Hitler's desperation gave him an epiphany as to what he needed. He needed a weapon so strong, so monstrously powerful, that it could bring back Germany from the depths of defeat. He started projects on various wonder weapons he would place his hope for victory in. He needed the intellect of various scientists and engineers in many fields from all across Germany to achieve a miracle such as this. Hitler, however, would only find despair, as none of the wonder weapons he hoped could save the Third Reich really turned the tables on the Allies. Even among the failures of the wonder weapons, which wonder weapon was the biggest disappointment?
To understand German wonder weapons, one must begin with the V-1 cruise missile, the pioneer of aerial weapons. Considered to be the first ever cruise missile and the first actual wonder weapon, the V-1 was a force to be reckoned with. Also known as buzz bombs and doodle bugs, this nearly 4,000-pound missile was used to decimate cities over long distances while traveling at very high speeds. This missile, unlike the other German wonder weapons, was actually used a lot, as more than 20,000 missiles were shot at countries like Britain, Belgium, and more. It was most devastating in Britain, as it was responsible for the deaths of 6,184 people in the British city of London. It also seriously injured 17,691 people. On the actual continent of Europe, the V-1 missile caused the most damage in Belgium, especially in the city of Antwerp. The weapon killed 4,683 people, both military personnel and civilians, and injured more than 10,075 people. Even though this weapon did prove very effective against Germany's enemies, defenses against this weapon were quickly developed by the Allied forces, like large anti-aircraft guns paired with radar systems to shoot the missiles out of the sky. These guns significantly reduced the effectiveness of V-1 missiles. The British also learned that this weapon was easily countered by following it in a fighter plane and tipping its wing down, causing it to fall into the water. Due to their poor navigation systems and lack of nuclear technology, the V-1 attacks on England and Belgium proved to be almost useless since important areas could not be targeted. All of these downsides do make the weapon fairly disappointing. However, the effects it had on European cities cannot go unnoticed, therefore it is not the most disappointing.
On the other end of the practicality spectrum was a massive space weapon. With space travel technology being theoretically possible, this weapon's creation came to the mind of the Fuhrer. The sun gun, or Sonnengewehr, was not a literal gun in space, but a concave mirror that was meant to shoot a focused beam of sun energy onto the Earth. The beam was meant to be so powerful that it could evaporate parts of the ocean or torch whole cities. The sun gun was to be launched into space in parts and constructed while in orbit. There were two main problems with constructing this behemoth weapon. One was the massive cost and long construction time. The project was going to cost an estimated 3 million marks, something the German government could not afford to spend on a prototype weapon. The other half of this problem was a projected 15-year construction period, a time the German army could not afford to spare in its Blitzkrieg war. The other reason was the impossibility of constructing a space weapon when the Germans had yet to find a way to get to space. Because of all these reasons, the project was scrapped and never touched again. Because of the early failure of this project, it was never built or had many resources wasted on it, so it would be hard to call it the absolute worst wonder weapon.
The next weapon to discuss is the V-2. Similar to the V-1, the V-2 was a large guided missile that could travel very long distances. This 2,000-pound missile improved much from the V-1, like having a radio system to shut off the engine and alcohol cooling to cool down the chambers of the warhead. The weapon also packed a larger explosive punch than the V-1. The biggest improvement, however, was that it was not so easily intercepted like the V-1. Unlike the V-1 that could easily be tipped into the water by aircraft, the V-2 launched so high and flew so fast that it was nearly impossible to intercept. Furthermore, the V-2 helped kickstart the space flight industry. However, this miracle weapon was not without flaws. Just like the V-1, the V-2 missile was very inaccurate and could only really be effective in a large area with many points worth attacking. The V-2 missile cost 10 times more than its previous inspiration, the V-1, resulting in fewer updated missiles. There ended up only being around 3,000 made, where the V-1s had over 20,000 missiles made. Clearly, this weapon had many faults that made it disappointing in certain aspects, but when taken into consideration the improvements it had over the V1, it is clear that this weapon is not the most disappointing. This next weapon, the Schwerer Gustav, is a beast of war machinery. Described as the largest weapon of the war, this monstrous railgun required over 20 wagons to move it from place to place, and used 2 cranes for assembly. This weapon was maintained by a crew of almost 4,000 men and could puncture a perfect hole through a 7-meter thick wall of cement with metal reinforcements like a hole puncher. The craters made by the shells of this gun, which are almost twice as tall as the average person, created a 12-meter or 39-foot wide and deep crater in strong terrain. This behemoth of a weapon could have devastated the war effort for the Allies if it were not for its severe flaws. After Sebastopol surrendered to Germany in the July of 1942, Gustav had nothing left to do. It was sent back to Krupp steel factory to have its barrel relined and returned fresh and ready just to only be used in demonstrations and test shots. This massive gun was considered to be used in an attack on Stalingrad or for another attack on England across the English Channel, but it never actually happened. The gun was never used for battle ever again. Gustav was shot a total of 300 times, 48 of which were in attack. This almost imaginable weapon that could destroy large reinforced targets with ease was barely used at all. One can consider this to be a large disappointment, as this weapon had the potential to greatly affect Germany's status in the war. Furthermore, this gun cost millions upon millions of dollars to construct, assemble, and maintain, as the barrel was easily worn down, which caused it to be very inaccurate and not to launch as far. These reasons are what make Schwerer Gustav a large failure and disappointment.
Overall, these weapons, whether actually developed or strictly experimental, are all feats of engineering that can be appreciated in different ways. However, these weapons failed to provide the support Hitler and his nation needed to regain their power over the Allied powers and the hope the German people needed to believe in the war effort again. Therefore, in their own way, they are all disappointing. However, the most disappointing is no doubt the Schwerer Gustav railgun. This weapon had so much potential to destroy opposing threats that lay in the Allied territories, but due to how difficult and expensive it was to maintain, it was simply underused.
This huge miracle weapon, if used properly, could have wiped out Allied threats on continental Europe and could have played a major role in a possible German victory during World War II. Modern military strategies can learn and evolve from the mistakes of the Schwerer Gustav by using the most powerful weapons a country has as much as possible within the laws of war. By using their best weapons, a nation at war has a better chance of success in battle. Also, using unknown and unique weapons can scare an enemy since they know little to nothing about said weapon.